Thank you very much for coming. Since Korma Prabhu has already had the kirtan, we'll start with our discussion. Welcome everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here in Ireland. I wish we could stay longer, but it's been quite a whirlwind tour. Maybe could those in this part of the room perhaps come closer? Yeah, please come. You can actually go right over here. I'm so happy to see Korma Prabhu. We actually worked together years ago, filming a cooking series called Cooking with Korma. It was one of our projects, and it was a huge success, I'm happy to say. Not due to my efforts, but Korma Prabhu's incredible cooking talents and personality. So it's really nice to see you again. We started touring with our film, Hare Krishna, the mantra, the movement, and the Swami who started it all, back in May. And at the end of May, we premiered the film at the Illuminate Film Festival in Sedona, Arizona, which is considered to be kind of a spiritual chakra on the planet. And that's a festival for spiritual seekers, for New Age people, for yoga followers. And that was actually our target audience for this film. Of course, we wanted to reach everyone. We feel everyone needs to hear Prabhupada's message. But that was our target audience. We were very surprised to win Best Picture in that festival. So that gave us some idea of the future of the possibilities we had toward the film to distribute it widely. And our expectations has gone way beyond our expectations. It's showed in about 130 movie theaters in America over a 3-month period. We were both traveling to as many places as we could for premieres and questions and answers after the film. That's a very popular feature with small documentary films. They have questions and answers from the director. By the way, I'm the director. Yadubara Dasa and Visakha Devi was co-director and writer. We had a great team in making the film. We had a lot of young, enthusiastic, energetic help. Lauren Ross especially was from Australia, just graduated from Sydney Film School, high-end school in Sydney. Very expert in storytelling. Her cousin, Jess Heinrich, joined the team after about 2 years of working. By the way, it took about 4 years to make the film. She joined us for the last 2 years. She was working for BBC Sydney in marketing and distribution, which was perfect for what we needed. So it seemed that Krishna was supplying our needs. I mean, things happened that we could never have imagined or expected, just to enhance the glories of Prabhupada on film. We were it was a very difficult project, how to glorify Prabhupada properly in an hour and a half, how to tell his story in the best way possible. It was very challenging. But again, we had a good team. Krishna Sanchez, also a young editor from LA, he joined the team. And we had one very expert set builder, Krishna Murari, also known as Kuva. Narayan Prabhu's son. Narayan Prabhu is the Prabhupada disciple, but his son is very expert in construction, set construction. So we actually built a replica of the Jaladuta cabin that Prabhupada came over from from India to America, and in our backyard. We have a little production house in Alachua, Florida. So we're very thankful for being here tonight. If you have any questions about the film, we'll speak a little bit more. I'd like Visakha to tell you about some of the challenges and difficulties in making the film.
Hare Krishna. Thank you again for inviting us here. It's very wonderful to be here. I was told before I came that Ireland weather was worse than England weather, but I'm questioning the veracity of that.
Well, it is worse because it's like 30 degrees in England today.
Oh, wow.
So it's still the same proportion of.
If we keep traveling west, we'll continue with the good weather.
Yeah.
So as far as the difficulties in making Hare Krishna, the biggest challenge we had was just the amount of material that we had. Just the footage of Srila Prabhupada, there's 31 hours, which is all contained in a series, 11-part series, DVD series called Following Srila Prabhupada. So that was a huge amount. We had a limit of 90 minutes for our film. Then beyond that, we did about 45 interviews with Prabhupada's followers and scholars. And that became, 90 to 100 hours of material to choose from. Then we went to India and we did reenactments in India of Prabhupada's childhood. He grew up in a Vaishnava family, very pious family, and meeting his spiritual master. We also did some reenactments in the United States. Prabhupada had a very serious heart attack in 1967 and returned to India. So we did a reenactment of that. And as my husband said, there was also this Jaladuta trip, and in our backyard we had the cabin, a reconstruction of the cabin, so that was another reenactment. And then beyond that, we wanted to establish what it was like in the 60s and 70s in the US when Prabhupada first arrived. So we got quite a bit of archival footage. The 60s in America was a very tumultuous time. There was all sorts of unrest, from civil rights demonstrations against this awful war in Vietnam that the U.S. was waging at that time. And it was also, there was a move for equal rights for women, to save the planet. The society was in upheaval when Prabhupada arrived. Also, we got footage because Prabhupada in India, before he came to America, he lived through World War II. He lived through the partition of India in 1947, so we have either still pictures or films of that. So we had just a mountain of material. And besides all that, our vision from the beginning was that we wanted Prabhupada to tell his story in his own words. And there's 1,800 hours of audio of Srila Prabhupada. That's lectures and conversations. And most of that, Prabhupada he explains the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, the vast majority. But once in a while, he'll speak about what it was like to be alone in New York City with no money and no friends and no supporters in the worst winter in 40 years. Sometimes he'll talk about his childhood growing up in the Vaishnava family that I mentioned. Sometimes he's talked about the terrible heart attack in 1967 where he thought he was going to die. And he returned to India because he thought he would pass away in Vrindavan. So we got these sentences which were like gold for us, and we put them together so that as much as possible Prabhupada tells his own story in his own words, which we felt was very authentic. And he also speaks a little bit of the philosophy. It's not exactly a lecture, but we have little pieces of the philosophy throughout to try to get an understanding of his basic teachings. So to weave all this together was a tremendous challenge for us, and that was the most time-consuming part of this 4-year project.
Yeah, some of the, my favorite review is from the LA Yoga magazine. And this is confirmed by many devotees and even outside people who have watched the film. They said that Hare Krishna movie is the second coming of Prabhupada. I love that. And really, the theater experience is the most dramatic way to see any movie. Of course, theaters are kind of going out these days, and DVD coming in, and home theaters and all that. But there's so many distractions at home, something to eat, bathroom, kids, phone, internet. it's a continuous barrage of stuff that goes on. But the theater is absolutely the best way to see it. And those who sit and watch and hear from Prabhupada for 90 minutes. Actually, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he said, just by seeing a Vaishnava, one's auspicious life is begun. That's a very powerful statement. Just by seeing a Vaishnava, one's auspicious life is begun. What to speak of hearing from him and seeing his activities and his life in 90 minutes. So, the film has crossed all religious and racial barriers. We had some Jains who saw the film in Mumbai. And they have a retreat in Gujarat, 250 acres, a beautiful city developing for 10,000 people. And they have a guru there. And so one of them suggested that we show our film at their monthly gathering. They have a huge amphitheater that holds 6,000 people. So we showed the film and 3,000 Jains watched it. And it was quite amazing. The guru was there. I was sitting next to him. He really liked it. So in that way, Prabhupada's message and personality and just his very being is really going around to affect everyone who watches the film. We had some showings in Botswana, Africa. We went to South Africa. I'd never heard of Botswana. Anyone heard of Botswana? Yeah? Not many. It's a country just north of South Africa. We had a screening there. Normally the screening, surprisingly also to us, has been in very high-end movie theaters. In America it was the Regal chain. In India it was the PVR chain. South Africa, Cine something chain. England, Odeon, and here Odeon. Where was it? Oh, Brazil. They showed me some pictures of the theater. They have totally reclining seats. And a button that you can press if you need anything, like drinks. So anyway, in Botswana, there was this little kind of rundown theater, but very nice audience. And the owner of the theater was a Muslim lady. And she actually loved the film. She loved the mood of the audience, as many theater managers do. Recently in the Odeon Theater in London, theater manager, we have a little blurb of him speaking about the mood of the audience afterwards. They really appreciate the mood. After that screening in Botswana, and many VIPs are coming also. This particular man was Black African Muslim, head of the university. He came up to me afterwards and he said, "Look down at my arms." This was kind of strange. I looked down at his arms and he had bumps. His hairs were standing on end. So this is somebody just had never known about the movement, never known about Prabhupada. So some of the reactions are quite extraordinary. I'm very happy to see the result. Our tour, we've been on tour since last May. Maybe we could give some more testimony.
So that is a year on the road.
Just about 11 months.
There was a couple, an elderly couple in the Chicago theater that came to see the film, and I marked them because generally the majority of the devotees attend, and the minority are non-devotees. But this couple was just the two of them. They weren't with a devotee. And at the end, the man came up to me, and he said that he had known of the devotees since the 1970s, and he had had a terrible, terrible experience with them and a terrible impression of them. And when he saw a little advertisement in the newspaper, Hare Krishna was playing, he came just out of curiosity. These terrible people, what are they up to now? And he had no idea about the founder of the movement, the history of the movement, the authenticity of the movement. So he really did 180 degrees by seeing this 90-minute film of Hare Krishna. because he had never looked into it before. He only saw these young, zealous people in the streets doing things which were not always legal. So yeah, he really changed completely. And then in Houston, there was an elderly woman in the very first row, and at the end, when we had time for questions and answers, she raised her hand and she said, "For a number of years now, I've had my own personal dream of what I wanted to do. But I keep saying to myself, you're too old, just forget about it, you're too old. But after I saw your film and what your spiritual master did at such an elderly age, I understand that I should pursue my dream." So it had an appeal for such a wide range of people in that way.
Sometimes, because the shows were going on so frequently, we'd split up. Visakha would go to Chicago, I'd go to Dallas, and crisscrossing all over, trying to be together as much as possible. I was at a show in Dallas, Tucson. And in Tucson, it's a retirement community, and many, many older people came to that screening. Great majority were elderly people. And many of them had received a book, or they saw the devotees, and it had been decades since that happened. And they were very curious. So it was filled with elderly people. As they were coming out, one person walked up to me, a lady, and she said, "Do you recognize me?" Looked me straight in the eye. And I would look for any hint of recognition. I couldn't see any. Then she said, "I'm Palika." Now, Palika served Prabhupada in the early days. She was his cook, and she also was a typist at the BBT, typing his manuscript. And she'd pretty much left the movement for years and years and years. So she came back to see the film. And we're finding that older devotees who have had some, whatever reason that they stopped coming into the temple or stopped associating with other God brothers and sisters, that they're also being revived by Prabhupada's story. So we'd like to, first of all, any questions? We'd like, yes.
How does Boy George like the film?
Oh, Boy George. I got a little interview with him. Yeah, he loved the film. Boy George is actually in the film. We see him singing "Bow Down, Mister." Anybody heard of that song, "Bow Down, Mister"? Yeah, very famous. I met him in the 90s in Los Angeles at one of his performances. But he very kindly donated his song, which normally was $2,500 to purchase the song. Pretty much everyone is appreciating the movie. We're very, very happy. Our whole focus on making this film was to make it for the public. All the Prabhupada's followers know his story, know his history, know everything about him, but the public really doesn't know. Back in 1974, we had just completed Hare Krishna People movie, the first film on ISKCON. And at that time, we asked Prabhupada if we could do a film in his life way back then. And his answer was, "What is the need?" And that was Prabhupada's humility. He never put himself forward. He always gave credit to his spiritual master or his disciples. So that's why today not many people know who founded the movement. Many people know Hare Krishna, but not many people know Prabhupada. So we really wanted from that time on, wanted the public to find out about this incredible personality who brought so much, such a great gift. In 1983, we released Your Ever Well-Wisher. That was a film on Prabhupada's life. That didn't see much outside circulation. But, and then about 4 years ago, at the beginning of this project, Hari Sari Prabhu asked us for a film on Prabhupada's life for the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium in Mayapur. So that got us going again. We thought that Your Ever Well-Wisher might be okay for that. But then I realized it was 33 years old, that film. And a lot has changed in terms of presentation and widescreen and technology, everything. So we had archival film from the early 70s and even before. We started filming Prabhupada in 1971. But we've collected footage over the years, just like the 26 Second Avenue. And those films of Prabhupada on the streets of New York were filmed by a filmmaker whose name is Damodar Prabhu. He was a very early filmmaker, so we would collect all these films that we, as many as we could, knowing that in the future we'd try to do this biography of Prabhupada's life. And the film of 26 Second Avenue came to us. One filmmaker at the time, he was working for a documentary film company, and the head of the film company asked him to go out and shoot his own documentary. So that film on 26 Second Avenue was his first documentary that he made. He'd seen the devotees, and he thought of them as a good subject. So we're very fortunate to have received that film also. We've been collecting over the years, preserving. Actually, what magazine? LA Times talking about the archival. New York Times. LA Times. LA Times appreciated all the archival footage of that time. We worked with two Academy Award nominees for documentary films. They saw our film early on. We were connected in Hollywood through different ways. And they saw a rough cut of the film, fell in love with Prabhupada, and wanted to help us in any way they could. So they were also a big help. I learned in master's degree course in photography to get as much input as you could with your films and still photographs, because it's a form of communication, and you want to know how you're doing. Photography is such a medium in film, it's magical. We tend to become enamored with our own creations and don't really understand fully how we're doing in terms of communication. That can especially be true with film. We got a lot of feedback, a lot of input, and very valuable. We did a test screening. Want to talk about the test screening?
We worked on the film in a place called Alachua, which is in central Florida. And about a half hour from Alachua is a city called Gainesville. And we had a test screening in the city. We put out advertisements that you could come and see a film for free, and in return you'd get a ticket to see any film of your choice in the regular cinema. And we had about 50 people come, and we gave them a questionnaire afterwards, and also had a discussion with them right after the film, which was very helpful because there were parts that were lagging, that were a bit slow, that we could pick up on. There were parts that were repetitious that we could easily correct. And also we did a survey as far as the title. Originally the title was Acharya, which means spiritual master, but it's a Sanskrit word and it's not widely known in English, although it is in the dictionary, but nobody uses it. So we weren't very happy with that title. So we had options of different titles, and the majority went to Hare Krishna. So therefore the title was changed from Acharya to Hare Krishna. And so the test screenings were very, very helpful. And we also, in a smaller venue, actually in our production house, we invited devotees to come and showed them the film and got reactions from them, which was quite different from the people in the test screening. But all of this we tried to incorporate in the film to make it the very best film possible about Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah, so what time is it? Does anyone have any questions at this point? Yes?
Where can we see the film? How can we access it? We want to see it.
Monday.
It's been screened at the Odeon Theatre in
Point Depot.
Point Depot.
Yeah.
And it's Monday the 14th, which is tomorrow week, and the film starts at 6:30 p.m.
How do we get tickets?
And there are a number of tickets left online. Isn't that right?
Yes, there's tickets online, and which you can and the audience cinema will have tickets on to purchase there as well.
You can show up there and purchase on site.
What's the online address?
Dublin Krishna Temple Facebook page.
Huh?
Dublin Krishna Temple.
If you go to the Dublin Krishna Temple Facebook page, you'll find a link which will get you right through to the ticket purchasing site.
Yeah, actually, the Odeon doesn't have it on their site. They're showing the film, but they're not selling the tickets.
Right, but the link on our site takes you straight through to the company who's handling the ticket sales. Yeah. Just a click away. And, credit card, sign in.
Any other questions? Probably.
Yeah, the Aborama. What is that? They the distributors? Or?
Yeah, they actually.
Interesting name, Rama for the film, for the distributor. And that's a company in New York. They distributed the film on Awake by Yogananda. And they distributed some very well-known films, 8 Days a Week by the Beatles, Ron Howard, the director. And they saw our film. They were recommended by producer and director of Awake. They gave us all our contacts, actually. They helped us with the film. Rama is owned by Richard Abramowitz. And it turns out many of the people we worked with had some prior contact with the movement. He got a big silver book in the 70s. Krishna book. Yeah. And another lady who was in charge of music clearance rights, she used to go to the Boston Temple for prasadam. Then she moved to San Francisco. She went to the San Francisco Temple for prasadam. A lot of people coming out of the woodwork to help us. They had some prior contact with the movement. So yeah, Rama, they were our American distributor. They're not our international distributor. We're trying to get through our international sales agent, get distributors in different countries. That's one reason the UK screening was so late. We didn't pick up a regular distributor. And also in Ireland, it's a company called Demand Films. They work in a different way than normal distributors. You can approach them, and if you get a certain number of people to attend the screening, then they'll arrange with the theater a time, and they'll show it. So anyone, they're all over the world, actually, this company. So anyone anywhere could get some friends together and advertise and have the film shown by approaching this company.
Another question.
Yeah.
Which countries hasn't it been shown in yet, and where is it heading next?
A lot of countries it hasn't been shown. Spain, France, Europe.
Yeah.
A lot of countries in Europe. But we're working on that. Spain is coming soon. Italy's coming soon. France is kind of a tough one. You know, we have a history there. And Latin America is really taken off. There's one Brazilian devotee that we know who lives in Alachua, a friend. He used to work for a high-end financial company in New York City. He was known as he was known as the, anyway, a person who the connector. He could connect people very well. So he organized the whole of Latin America for showings with one very big company called Sinopolis. They have hundreds of theaters all over Latin America. So he got them on board, and he organized the whole of the Latin American congregation and devotees to help advertise and coordinate. So Brazil is starting in a few days. Mexico City happened about 3 weeks ago, and it's screened in 53 cities around Mexico on that very night. I think it's in over a dozen countries in Latin America. Prabhupada visited Mexico City a couple of times, I believe. He really liked the Latin American people. He said they're very pious. So I think the film will do very well in Latin America.
Has it screened in Russia and Ukraine?
Yeah, it's screened in Russia. That was the first international country I went to, Russia. And surprisingly enough, it's screened on Prabhupada's appearance day, the night of Prabhupada's appearance day in Russia. They opened it in one theater. It sold out in 12 hours. They opened a second theater, that sold out, and then a third theater, so 3 theaters. Maybe about 700 people. Russia is featured in the film. That's an incredible story.
1971, Srila Prabhupada had been expressing for some time that he really wanted to bring Krishna consciousness to the communist countries. And everyone told him that's just not possible, you just can't go there. But somehow or other he got permission to meet this one Professor Kotovsky, and he and 2 devotees, disciples of his, went to Moscow in 1971. And when they arrived, they were searched, as everyone was searched to arrive, and they found Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. And there was some tension there, and finally the customs official said, "It is not serious offense, he does not have to go to concentration camp." But Prabhupada met this Professor Kotovsky, and he was there only 3 days, and one day Shyam Sundar was out at a bank exchanging money, getting rubles. And there were a couple of young men who came up to him and said, "Do you have any Beatles records?" And he said, "No, but the Beatles' spiritual master is back in my hotel." So these 2 young Russian men came back to the hotel, and one of them asked amazingly wonderful questions. Who am I? What is the purpose of life? How do I attain the purpose of life? And Prabhupada spent hours discussing with this young man these very profound questions that are so important for every human being. And he completely convinced him, so much so that he gave his entire life to Krishna consciousness. And he took the greatest risk one can take and managed to spread the movement so that now there are tens of thousands of devotees in Russia from this one seed that Prabhupada planted. That in itself is an extraordinary story. So it just forms a very small part of this Hare Krishna film, but a very amazing part.
Any more questions?
Mataji, having so much footage and so much material when you sit down to write a story that takes only 90 minutes of somebody's life to fit so many years and so much
Terry's a filmmaker.
process into it of time and everything else you want to show. How did you block it out for that section, for that first, second, third? Did you know what you wanted to put in at the start, or did you just sort of just start listening to material and let the story find you, or?
It was really a combination of both, but we also studied the hero's journey. Are you familiar with that? Joseph Campbell has studied stories from cultures around the world, hundreds and hundreds of cultures, and he found a common thread in all the stories, that you have the hero who's in his ordinary life, and something happens so that he moves to some, he has a challenge, right? In Prabhupada's case, in 1922, he got an instruction from his spiritual master, preach the message of Lord Chaitanya, of Krishna, to the English-speaking people of the world. And he argued with that. He didn't accept it right away. He had an argument. He was defeated, and he said that he was very glad to be defeated. And then from that meeting, his entire life changed. And because of that change, finally, at an elderly age, he went to America, risking his life, and devoted himself completely to fulfilling the order of his spiritual master with complete faith in his spiritual master, Krishna. And then in that journey, there were tremendous obstacles. There were times when it looked like all was lost, and there were victories too. And even towards the end, there were obstacles not from Prabhupada so much in terms of his health, as there had been earlier, but from outsiders. Oh, they're actually brainwashed, and the devotees were being kidnapped, and they were being challenged in the court. So this formed the basic structure of the story, this hero's journey, which is a traditional journey. And Prabhupada's story fits beautifully into that motif, you could say. And then it became a matter of fleshing out these different elements and making this very dramatic presentation, which it naturally is.
You know, in our previous film, Your Ever Well Wisher, we started with Prabhupada's birth in Calcutta and went straight through chronologically. That's not done very much these days in terms of creative documentaries. We wanted to be a little more, do some flashbacks and so forth. That was a big challenge, how to structure the film to make it interesting. So we thought, as you saw just now in the first 10 minutes to start, there was the introduction leading up to the title. Then we start right at the dramatic point of the story of Prabhupada alone in New York. That's the crux of the interest. How did he do it? He was alone. He had no money. He had no contacts. So how did he dig himself out of that? So we started at that point, and then a little later on in the film, we go back to his early childhood, do some reenactments, and another flashback after that. So that took a long time figuring out the structure. Yeah.
A lot of people are asking, is it ever going to get onto things like Netflix and things like that? Are we making any progress?
Yeah, our international sales agent is working on Netflix. We're going to be on iTunes and Amazon. That's not so difficult. Netflix is a little more challenging. They expressed interest in North America, but maybe not international at this point. But we'll see. I think they may have changed their mind. We're going to talk with them again because it's done so well in theaters. Netflix looks at theater attendance. So that helps us to get more people in the theater. And again, that's the best way to watch it. Not on a small screen, but in the movie theater. So we're hoping for a good turnout on Monday. And they say actually it's better the second time. I think especially for followers of Prabhupada, because it's quite amazing to see Prabhupada on the big screen, so that's kind of on reverence there. But there's a lot in that film. There's many layers, you can say. And so yeah. One couple came up to us at our Delhi premiere in November. It's actually screened 700 times in India. And it started with a Delhi premiere. We had the Vice President of India attend. And one couple came up to me from Hawaii. And they said, this is our 8th time seeing the film. Yadubara Swami, who actually loves films. He did some filmmaking courses in college. So when he met Prabhupada, he made a vow that he wanted to bring as many people to meet Prabhupada as possible because he knew if they met him, their life would change to one degree or another. So he lives in Santa Barbara. It's about an hour and a half from LA. So in our 2-week LA premiere time, he saw it, I think, 5 or 6 times. And each time he brought a dozen people, 20 people, 15. So he feels that this is, he can continue to bring people to Prabhupada through the movie. So, anything else? All right. Next program?
We're going to have Arati.
Talk about after.
Please continue if you want to speak.
Yeah, just about her book.
Oh, yes.
Let's do
Oh,
that.
yeah, just
Yes,
we
yes.
have these books available, just a few copies. If anyone is interested, I'd be happy to sign them if you would like.
Can you give us a summary of the content of the book?
Yeah, I'll just say a little bit about it. That I learned a lot about my wife reading her book, even after 45 years, because it's she really reveals her mind and heart. We can talk about history and dates and places and all that, but she really reveals very deep feelings in her transformation from atheism to theism.
My parents were atheists, so they raised my brother and me as atheists. And I was kind of an active atheist. I preached atheism. And then I met John Yadubara in college, and he went to India in 1970, and then from India he wrote to me and invited me to come. So in early 1971 I went to India, and there I met Srila Prabhupada and the devotees, and Prabhupada instructed us at one point to go to Vrindavan. And Vrindavan in 1971 is very different from Vrindavan today, to say the least. And being in Vrindavan for a month, I had a transformation, because I had a certain emptiness and confusion in my mind and heart. Although I was an atheist, I didn't understand what life was for, why people were working so hard. It didn't make any sense, the whole thing. And in Vrindavan, the atmosphere itself was imbued with devotion, and the people, the residents of Vrindavan, the Brijbasis, have so much faith. They don't have much materially. Most of them are not highly educated, but they had so much faith that it was palpable for me. I could actually experience their faith. It was tangible in some ways. And that really opened me to the possibility that there was a world beyond the world I could see, and perhaps that world was what was missing in my life. So it's the story of transformation by Prabhupada's mercy.
Karma Prabhu, you're on your third reading.
Yep.
Can you
Well, I finished 2 readings, and I'm going to go and start it again when I get home.
can you say something about that? Yeah.
I got a lot from the second reading.
How?
It was when I read it the second time, I found a lot of stuff that I somehow or other my mind hadn't been able to absorb, because it's so deep and so profound, and I mean it's written wonderfully. The style of the writing is wonderful, and it completely absorbed my mind. I just couldn't put it down.
That's great.
For hours and hours a day.
Great view.
And I highly recommend it. Wonderful, wonderful book.
Okay. We can have the art take.
I think, is it true?
You just, in your book, you say the challenges you faced as a woman, do they still exist, or is it a bit easier now, or?
It's really different in different places. In India, it's still very conservative and not very encouraging for women in Krishna consciousness, whereas in other places, it's the opposite. So it's very localized. You can't give one answer for the whole society in that way.
Was Srila Prabhupada troubled by that? Because he must have had to deal with all these different opinions and different things wherever he went.
My impression was that Prabhupada realized that his followers were, first of all, very young, very inexperienced spiritually, and often very immature. And so he wanted to keep them encouraged, at the same time guide them, and that's kind of not an easy balance. So he would give instruction. Sometimes it would be overzealous, and he would just let it go, again, not wanting to discourage. But there are very clear letters where he establishes that women should have equal opportunity to serve. So it's a question of maturity, I think, which of course takes time and cannot be forced.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, in the early days in India, I was one of the elders at age 26. You can imagine. As we see in the film later on, Prabhupada was dealing with mostly teenagers, the hippies, assorted lot.
I just want to also say, just when I'm reading the book, actually during Prabhupada's disappearance celebration here, you actually read your description of that time, and a lot of times we read the biography description, which is very, very nice as well, obviously. But it was very moving here in the temple when we read it, because I think I've never seen a book where you really felt the presence of what was happening, but also just how it was affecting yourself so in such a personal way. And I think that I was only reading it at the time, and I just felt I have to read this for everybody else, because it was such a we really felt very much what you all must have felt at that time, when my grandfather was reading. And actually, when I was reading, I couldn't continue, because it affected me in such an emotional way, actually. But another question though I was going to ask as well is that this is like an incredible journey with this with your book and with the film, but at some point you must have gone over. You were just Yadubara when you were in India, and you mustn't have been aware that what would have actually happened. You were just kind of you were taking photographs at the time, and it was. Did you ever at any time and early on realize that it was going to, who you were dealing with was Srila Prabhupada and how he was affecting her? How did that affect you at the very beginning? How did you feel?
We always felt Prabhupada was a very, very special personality. That he could know who you are, who you really are, your mind, your heart, you as the soul, not just the body or the mind. And it was very deep being in his presence. As far as our service, we didn't, couldn't foretell the future. We didn't know. We were just doing our service, taking pictures and as much film as we could of Prabhupada. And the pure devotee knows past, present, and future. So we're not on that level.
And did you? Like a lot of people around that time as well, like to be in the presence of somebody like that, like Srila Prabhupada, it could be very challenging as well, because I suppose as Visakha was saying, that at the beginning we're coming to Krishna consciousness initially, and it can be your own, where we're not pure devotees, we're coming from a different idea, from a different platform, but you seem to be there during a lot of very challenging times as well. I mean, but you were able to continue with your service, and did you ever feel at some time that you were, that because being with Prabhupada must have been quite heavy as well, because a lot of people have said. Yeah,
there were times, especially in the early days, especially in Calcutta, early 1971. A lot of difficulties externally, internally. Just being in a different culture. I was in the Peace Corps for 3 years, and we had a psychologist who would train us in what to expect in a different culture, something called beware of culture shock. Because if you're living in a different culture, your communication can be really different, not always communicating properly. It can be a very lonely experience. So there were a lot of difficulties in those early days. The Prabhupada's presence always smoothed everything out, made everything clear and understandable. So shall we have Arati? Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.